So during chapter 11, we basically just talked about all the contracts, the elements that make up the contracts, how it's seen in the eyes of the law, what the unilateral and bilateral contracts are, express and implied contracts, void, voidable, and valid, and the quasi contracts. Probably said that one wrong, but so contracts is deals among others. It's like between a couple parties, and this can be between person to person, business to business. And once these contracts are in, like, set and forth, there's a third party there to witness it. These are legally binding, and once broken, it will come down to damages and other things to make that contract right again, or for to make up for the contract, to make sure like no one kind of gets taken advantage of. So some of the requirements of a contract to make it valid is an agreement between one or more parties. And then another one is a consideration. So this means any promises made by the parties of the contract must be supported legally. And there's also the contractual capacity, and that means both parties that enter into the contract must have contractual capacity to do so. It's like they're the law recognizes them as parties that are able to do this, or like they can legally do this. And then the last part is legality. And this is making sure everything that the contract has, or every part of the contract, is legal, and like there's nothing illegal about the contract, about it, or to make it a valid contract in the eyes of the law. The unilateral and bilateral type of contracts. So the bilateral is a promise for a promise. So this is like it's a promise by literally what is actually stated. And then the unilateral is a promise for an act. So like I promise, like if I were to promise to pay you something, if you were to give me this in return. So like if I was to pay a company like $1,500 to do my landscaping or something like that, that would be a unilateral contract. Whereas a bilateral, it's a promise for a promise. So I'll give you this as long as you give me this. So it kind of works both ways. Express and implied contract. Express is formed by words, and this is how it's stated out, is exactly how the contract is. Whereas implied contracts are like there's some parts of it that are actually like implied, in a way, like by the conduct of the parties. So the party will kind of be like, this is exactly what we mean, but of course this is also implied with it. So those are kind of implied contracts. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is the valid, void, voidable, and the quasi contracts. Valid contracts are valid. They're contracts that are valid, that meet all the requirements. There's an agreement. Both parties agree with it. It's seen legally through the system, through the law. Void. That means there's no contract. Like the contract does not exist. At least like without any legal obligations, there's just no contract. Voidable, it means one party has an option of avoiding the contract or getting out of it. So like there is a way for them to get out of it if something were to happen. Like there's like some clause inside the contract. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is the quasi contracts. And these are contracts that are implied in law. So they're not like actual contracts. They're like fictional contracts that can impose on the parties, like as if something were to happen. So like this company comes in, they make a contract with another company. If this were to happen, then this would happen. Like then this Kasai contract would be, this is where this would play in. It's like if this happens, then this is where this will happen, or like there's like an extra part that kind of comes into play with these.